The Malibu wind always carried something with it. Salt, heat, silence. But that evening it carried something heavier. I couldn't name it at first. Just a weight behind my ribs, like the ocean itself was trying to warn me. I pulled into the driveway and sat there a moment, engine ticking softly. The house, our mansion, stood there like a painting. Golden stucco, glass that caught the dying sun. But it never felt like mine, never once. You can live somewhere for 10 years and still feel like a guest. I stepped inside. The scent of jasmine and lemon polish filled the air, but it didn't cover the chill underneath. My heels clicked against the marble floor. Too loud, too alone, no voices, no footsteps, just silence. The kind that makes your skin itch. I'd given up my career, law school, bar prep, all of it, because Marcella insisted I was better suited for family. I smiled, I adapted, I gave. That's what you do when you're raised to make peace, not war. Walking down the hallway, I paused outside Marcella's office. The door was cracked, just slightly, enough for instinct to whisper, "Wait, I shouldn't have," but I did. I pushed the door just enough to step inside. My plan was simple, grab the charger I kept plugged in here, but her laptop was open, facing me. That blue glow against the mahogany desk felt like an invitation. I hesitated, half-turned to leave. Then I saw the subject line. Distribution plan, no inheritance for Clementine. I froze. The room buzzed, though nothing made a sound. My pulse climbed into my ears. I didn't want to read it, but I did. Line after line, cold legal phrasing, airtight logic, clauses wrapped in false kindness. To ensure responsible allocation. Ineligible due to non-blood status. Marcella's discretion. They weren't just disinheriting me, they were erasing me. I took a shaky breath and copied the entire email to my phone. My hands moved like they belonged to someone else. I deleted the history, shut the lid, straightened the chair. No trace left behind. But inside something cracked. Not loud, just final. At dinner that night, the house came alive in a way it never did when I was alone. Laughter echoed off the walls. Silverware clinked. Glasses filled and refilled. I sat at the far end of the table across from Marcella, who looked radiant in that polished, poisonous way only she could pull off. She raised her glass. "To family," she said, locking eyes with me. Then came the cut. "Some people are just guests in this family bukvalna, but even guests can be gracious." A soft chuckle from her side of the table. My husband didn't flinch, didn't speak, just wiped his mouth and looked away. I smiled, nodded, sipped wine that tasted like vinegar. My hand trembled slightly as I set the glass down. I imagined I was watching the whole scene from above, like a drone camera hovering over a movie set. If I stood up and walked out, would anyone chase after me? Would they even notice? Nobody spoke to me for the rest of dinner. When it was over, I climbed the stairs slowly. Each step stretched out like my body needed time to catch up to what my mind already knew. In the bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my phone. Read the email again and again. The words didn't change, but something in me did. I thought about storming into Marcella's room, slamming the laptop shut in front of her, demanding answers. But I knew better. That's not how they fight. They win by being calm, by making you seem unstable. I opened a browser window, typed California inheritance law, spouse exclusion loopholes. A flash of my father's voice came back to me, low and firm. "When you're powerless, get smart. That's the only way you win without blood." I downloaded a voice recorder app just in case. Then I looked out the window toward the garden where Marcella used to host charity brunches. The lights were off, but I could still see the outline of the lemon trees. I wasn't ready to act, not yet, but I would watch. I would wait and I'd listen, closer than I ever had before. Morning came too fast. I hadn't slept, not really. My eyes had closed, but my mind had been pacing, still stuck in that moment from the night before. I needed air. not from a vent or ceiling fan, real air, something that didn't belong to them. The garden was quiet, still damp with coastal mist. I walked barefoot, letting the coolness bite my skin. The scent of wisteria hit before I saw it. Sweet, dense, almost cloying. That's when I heard them, voices, low, clipped. I froze near the hedge wall, steps from the patio, just behind the curtain of purple blooms. Marcella and Thaddeus. He wasn't family, not by blood, but he might as well have been, their go-to fixer, attorney, vault of secrets. Once it's liquidated, she's out of the picture, Marcella said, cool as ever. Thaddeus nodded, murmured something about timing and risk. Her window is closing. They never said my name, but they didn't need to. I pulled my phone from my pocket and hit record. This wasn't paranoia. This was real, intentional, coordinated. I remembered something my old law professor once said. If someone treats you like an expense, make yourself a damn investment. That thought steadied me. I stepped back quietly, careful not to snap a twig or breathe too hard. I didn't need the confrontation yet, just the proof. Back upstairs, the hallway was still, too still. Corbin sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through his phone, shirtless, coffee in hand like it was just another Sunday. When he saw me, he smiled, wide, warm, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. I leaned against the dresser. Can I ask you something? He looked up, expectant. Sure. The trust, the family money. What happens if someone like me gets cut out? His brow creased. He set the cup down. Where's this coming from? I overheard just a bit of a conversation. Clementine, he said, drawing my name out like I was a child inventing ghosts. You're reading too much into things again. That again stung more than I thought it would. I'm serious, I said. He walked toward me, wrapped an arm around my waist. You've been tense lately. You're tired. It was just a dinner. You didn't defend me, I said flatly. He hesitated. Mom has a strong personality, he finally offered. She humiliated me. He kissed my hand. You're being sensitive. You know she didn't mean anything by it. I'm not paranoid, I said, this time with steel behind it. He let go, stepped back. I never said you were, but maybe you're reading intentions where there are none. And just like that, he walked into the bathroom. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was rehearsed. I stood there, trying to shake it off, but something had shifted. He wasn't just brushing me off. He was guiding me away from the edge of something. On purpose. I remembered his face last night. The way he didn't look at me when Marcella spoke. That wasn't discomfort. That was agreement he didn't want to wear out loud. I waited until he left for his morning run. Marcella always insisted he keep a strict schedule. Predictability was her favorite virtue. Downstairs, the study was empty. I moved fast. The drawer behind the portrait opened with a tug. Inside were old albums, estate papers, and one worn folder labeled in pen. Legacy Contingency Planning. I flipped it open. Charts. Legal strategy. No specific accusations, just plans. Names, timelines. And then I saw it. Marisol Vance. My stomach turned. I hadn't heard that name in years. We were friends once until she took something from me. An opportunity, a deal, a future. It had been petty back then, but her name didn't belong here. Not in my house, not in these files. I scanned the pages, snapped photos, then carefully placed everything back exactly where it had been. On the surface, I was just organizing dusty family photos, but inside I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Awake, back upstairs, I sat on the floor, legs crossed, phone in hand. Recordings, photos, notes. I opened a private Dropbox, titled the folder Plan B. If they were moving pieces behind my back, I needed to build my own board. I spent years dimming myself down to fit this family's mold. I whispered to myself, that ends today. Just as I hit the final upload and closed the screen, A voice I knew too well cut through the silence like a knife behind my spine. "What are you doing with my mother's papers?" I stood in the kitchen staring at the electric kettle like it had offended me. The button clicked, but nothing happened. No whirring, no heat, just silence. The damn thing had always worked, like everything else in this house that was built to impress, not to function. My hand hovered over it, waiting for a response that wouldn't come, and then, out of nowhere, I heard my mother's voice in my head, soft and plain. "If it doesn't boil, don't force it. Maybe it wasn't meant to." I used to roll my eyes at that kind of talk. Today it landed like a brick. The kitchen gleamed, marble counters, spotless chrome, herbs no one ever used still perky in their pots. This wasn't a kitchen you cooked in, it was a kitchen you showed off in magazines. I'd spent 6 years standing in it, but I might as well have been in a showroom window. I grabbed my phone and stepped out into the garden again. This time I didn't need air, I needed answers. I slid my finger over the screen and replayed the recording from earlier. Marcella's voice, sharp and measured, Thaddeus, murmuring things that sounded like legal threats, disguised as strategy. I listened to my own breath on the recording, too shallow, too careful. Even my voice, when I whispered to myself, didn't sound like it belonged to me anymore. Nothing in this place did. The kettle wasn't broken, the house was, the life was. I made my way back inside. The housekeeper was struggling to pull a linen bin through the hallway. I offered to help. She mentioned needing extras for the guest room. Someone might be coming next week. Some friend of Marcella's. That guest room had barely been used since Corbin and I got married. It used to be his home office, back when he still had hobbies, privacy, thoughts I wasn't allowed into. The closet door stuck a little when I pulled it open. Behind the old binders and spare pillows, something dark caught my eye. A journal, leather-bound, his name embossed. I knew the look of it. It was the kind of gift Marcella would have given, tasteful and expensive. I sat on the bed and opened it. Only one entry was written. "I'm marrying her because she's safe. Mother says love is messy, and I've had enough of mess." Dated 6 months before our wedding. I didn't cry, not even a little. Instead, I placed the book in my lap and looked around the room. The wallpaper had changed, the rug too, but the silence hadn't. It was still the same, so that was it. Safety, predictability. I was a decision made to avoid chaos. I could have screamed, I didn't. I stood up, placed the journal back exactly where I found it, and went downstairs. Something was turning in my chest, not rage, not sadness, just adjustment. Back in the study, I waited until I was sure Marcella had left. Her driver's voice echoed down the hall when he announced she'd be at brunch until 7. I unlocked the drawer again. Same folder, same pen-stroked, label legacy, contingency planning. I flipped through the pages slower this time. Line by line, clause 37. I read it twice. In the event of Clementine's incapacitation or divorce, her voting rights in the Vance estate revert to Marcella Vance. 14 mentions of my name in the fine print. I counted. 0 mentions of me in the living room photo albums. She didn't just want me out, she'd planned it. Before the vows, before the house, before I ever stood a chance. I printed 2 pages and tucked them into the back of my own journal. No noise, no rush, just facts. I remembered something Marcella once said at a fundraiser, to a room full of donors who hung on every syllable. Control is quiet. It's in the margins, not the headlines. That sentence lived in me now. As the sun began to dip lower, I stepped onto the balcony outside our bedroom. The wind had picked up just a little, enough to rustle the ivy without turning it into a show. I thought about the last 48 hours, the email, the recording, the journal, the trust clause, all of it like a puzzle I wasn't supposed to solve, but now that I had, I couldn't unsee the picture. I kept trying to build a life inside someone else's architecture. It's time I drew my own blueprint. I listened again to the recording, read Corbin's journal line, not to bleed, but to remember. This wasn't reaction anymore, it was planning. I looked at my left hand. The ring had been on so long, I'd stopped feeling it. Now it felt like a handcuff. I slipped it off and placed it on the counter next to the dead kettle, and as I turned to leave the kitchen, a faint whistle echoed behind me. A second kettle, one I hadn't touched, was boiling on its own. They threw a spotlight on Elysia in the main hall like she'd brokered peace in the Middle East. Her face beamed from a roll-up banner with gold trim. Beside her, a plaque listing the founding committee for the new community initiative. My name was nowhere to be found. Marcella played host with effortless charm, ushering donors and family friends toward the display. She wore that glassy smile that stopped just short of warmth. Elysia, bless her, soaked it all in like she earned every ounce of credit. I stood in the back, hands clasped, smile frozen. I could hear Laurel, a family friend from Palm Springs, lean in close and murmur, "That house on the East Ridge? That was your vision, wasn't it?" I nodded, nothing more. She squeezed my arm and walked away, but her words stayed. They knew, at least some of them did. I remembered the nights I sat drafting concept notes, trying to convince the family foundation that local was better than legacy. Elysia barely knew where half the districts were on the map, but her name was shiny, easy to print. I clapped when they toasted her, even smiled when she waved at me, but something under my skin itched like a slow burn. Not rage, not yet, just a fracture, the kind that starts small and splits everything with time. When the speeches ended and the guests filtered out, I made my way to the finance wing. I needed one folder, just one, but when I typed in my code at the vault, the keypad blinked red. I tried again, red, tried my override, red again. I checked my devices. Phone, tablet, nothing connected. My profile had vanished from the system. A guard stepped into view, arms crossed like he'd been waiting. "Mum," he said, polite but firm, "your access was revoked this morning. Orders from Mrs. Vance's office." I looked at him hard, like I could crack through the professionalism and find a human face behind it. But there was nothing. "Do you know why?" I asked. "I was just told the change was permanent." Permanent, not paused, not reviewed, not temporary. I turned without another word, but every step down that hall, my pulse screamed. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't even just a control grab. This was an erasure. By the time I reached the double doors of the financial offices, I didn't knock. I shoved them open. Marcella sat at the head of the conference table, flanked by Corbin on one side and an assistant I didn't recognize on the other. They were reviewing documents, casual as ever. "Why am I locked out of my own files?" I asked. Marcella didn't look up. "You never owned them," she said calmly, flipping a page. "You were a placeholder. Now you've been replaced." Corbin glanced at me, then down at the table, his hands fiddling with a pen. "You said you trusted me with this foundation," I pushed. I said what I had to," Marcella cut in. "It was your name on the paperwork, not your power." A breeze from the open balcony door lifted a folder and scattered pages across the table. One page landed face up near me, stamped in red. "Clementine rights revoked, effective immediately." Corbin still wouldn't look at me, not even once. I didn't shout, I didn't cry, I left. Back in my private study, I closed the door behind me and locked it, the kind of lock no one in that house thought I'd use. I sat at my desk, took a breath, then another. The applause from earlier still echoed in my memory. Elysia's name on every mouth. My fingerprints on every file now scrubbed clean. My face missing from every story they told. "You never gain control by asking nicely," I whispered, something my grandfather used to say when the world chewed him up and made him spit iron back. I opened a voice memo app, hit record. "Tonight I build my altar out of their lies," I said, calm, certain. I slid one of my printed copies of the trust clause into a hollowed-out spine of an old book. First edition, leather-bound. No one ever touched it but me. I stood. and as I reached for the doorknob to leave the study, I caught the hallway portraits from the corner of my eye, every family member, the same curated arrangement, except the one where my face used to be, gone. The evening air inside the library felt heavy, as though every book lined the walls with secrets. I invited her for tea. Marcella agreed with that pale smile she always wore when she meant to hide something. She sat across from me, the light catching the edges of her jewelry, her posture spotless, calm, contained. I spoke softly. "Do you remember when I first met you at the Foundation Gala?" I let it breathe. I was awestruck by your poise. She nodded, cool and mild. It's interesting how admiration turns to understanding and then to strategy. I leaned forward just enough. Some clauses in the trust, those contingency documents, they are public record. My tone stayed level. I didn't accuse, I implied. Her eyes narrowed just a flicker. She studied me, then sipped her tea. She played it cool. After at dinner the mood shifted. The long table glowed under chandeliers. Marcella stood, raised her glass. "A toast! Here's to those who stay in their lane and those who don't mind crashing into walls." The laughter was polite, uneasy. Corbin's laugh came too loud, forced. I raised my glass. "To transparency, the kind that makes everyone at the table slightly uncomfortable." A hush fell. Eyes turned. The painting behind me, my face missing, seemed to drip shame. Corbin's gaze flickered away. Later in my study, I replayed my own voice memo. Steady, composed, unwavering. I've played this game too long with borrowed rules. I'm rewriting the contract. I opened the calendar. The trust's review date, 2 weeks away. That's my battleground, the moment I'd either break or break open. Should I risk exposure now? Or wait until I hold every move? I chose patience because a knife only cuts clean when it's sharp. Tidying my jewelry box, my fingers brushed a brooch in the shape of a dagger, the gift she gave me years ago. I remembered her words then. Even ornaments can be weapons in the right hands. I pinned it on, looked in the mirror, not as a victim, but as someone prepared. I slipped my wedding ring into the drawer next to a list of names, possible allies, old friends, enemies turned potential support. I closed the drawer gently and froze. The door creaked behind me. Marcella stood there, her glass in hand, a look I'd never seen before flickering across her face. By midday, the house already felt smaller, like its walls had started leaning in. I sat in the meeting room with Rowena, the only lawyer I trusted enough to bring into this mess. The polished table reflected the folders I had stacked. Emails, trust clauses, journal entries, copies of my recordings. I slid them toward her. "It's all here," I said. She scanned the papers quickly, her pen tapping a steady rhythm. "We could file an injunction," she murmured, "or we leak, press first, court second." Her voice had that careful edge of someone playing with matches. Audrich's face appeared on the screen at the end of the table. The banker's voice was low but steady. "Transfers in and out of Vance Holdings aren't routine," he said. "Someone's covering tracks." My hands were cold even though the room was warm. This was my first real move into daylight after months in the shadows. I thought of my father's advice, start learning when you feel powerless, and I straightened my shoulders. We drafted the statement line by line. The PR team I'd quietly assembled dialed in, muted, waiting for my word. The release read, "Significant irregularities have been detected in the administration of the Vance Trust. An internal review is underway." I read it aloud once, then again, tasting each syllable like metal. I hesitated. "This could scorch people who don't deserve it," I said. Rowena glanced up. "That's how fire works." I signed anyway, breathing in, breathing out. The first stone had been thrown. By late afternoon, as the press release started circulating in business newsletters, the family hosted yet another event on the terrace, celebrating future visionaries. Guests in silk and polished shoes sipped champagne under white tents. Elijah, bright as a blade, stood at the podium. "It's an honor to lead such meaningful projects," she said, smiling wide. A video played behind her, architectural sketches I had made, programs I had built. Every credit line read her name. Applause swelled. I sat at the back table, notebook open, writing names. No one looked at me. My hands itched to tear the screen down. Inside my head, the words thudded. They just stole my narrative again. My jaw ached from holding still. I forced myself to clap once, softly. After dessert, Marcella rose, glass raised. "Let's not mistake noise for substance," she said, a sweet smile frosting her words. She walked to my table and set a sealed envelope in front of me. "For you." Inside, a cease and desist order, ink still fresh. Corbin leaned in, voice low. "You're overreaching, Clementine. Don't make this personal." I looked at him, then at her, and felt something inside me lock into place. The fury burned clean like alcohol on a wound. I tucked the envelope under my arm, stood slowly, and left without a word. Later, alone in my office, I checked my Dropbox, untouched. The hidden device I'd planted in Marcella's office during lunch was recording just fine. I pressed play, voices, movement of assets, a go silent clause, evidence in their own words. I saved it in encrypted form, my heart steady now. Then my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Did you really think you'd strike and not be struck back?" Late afternoon light filtered through the blinds like bars on a cell, striping the carpet in the archives wing. My pulse felt too loud as I approached the vault door. I'd waited for the right moment. Marcella out with her foundation partners, staff busy prepping the next dinner. I keyed in the codes I'd memorized, fingers steady but damp. The lock blinked green and opened with a hush, but what waited inside was absence. The folders I'd come for, Vance Trust Asset Allocation, were gone. Shelves that had been full of ledgers now held blank space like missing teeth. A guard rounded the corner, his voice neutral. "Mrs. Vance, I was told these files are sealed until further notice." My throat tightened. "Just checking on something for Corbin," I said lightly, picking up a random map. He eyed the papers but didn't stop me. I slipped out with whatever scraps I could grab. Old maps, partial signatures, a single page of asset movement. Shock and adrenaline mixed like oil and water in my chest. The archives smelled of paper and dust, a smell that used to calm me but now felt like warning. I crouched between shelves, phone flashlight low, cross-referencing, year stamps, file names, anything that still told a story. That's when I saw it, a folder labelled Barnes Successes 2030. My hands trembled as I opened it. Alicia's name sat at the top in bold. My name wasn't anywhere. Beside it lay 2 versions of a deed draft. The original, with me as beneficiary, and the replacement, clean and clinical, signed last month. I lined them up on the floor and photographed them side by side, screen glowing in the dim room. My grandmother's voice whispered from memory. "Always keep the original copy." I slid the older document into my bag and closed the folder as if nothing had happened. Betrayal had a smell now, like stale ink and cold metal. I walked into the long portrait corridor, the hallway where family smiles had always watched me pass. In the newest painting, my face had been scrubbed from the group, the background patched over with a vase of roses. Marcella's heels clicked behind me before I saw her reflection in the glass. She clapped once, softly. "Looks like the gallery finally reflects reality," she said. I turned slowly. "You erased me from your walls. I'll erase your rule from this house." My voice was flat, no tremor left. She tilted her head, eyes glinting. "Go ahead, I've already set the board in motion." Then she walked away, leaving the faint scent of her perfume in the empty corridor. I stayed there after she left, hand pressed to the frame where my face should have been. Mint rose china detail painted at the corner caught my eye. the one I'd chosen for that gala years ago. "If I don't exist in your story," I murmured, "I'll write a new one you can't ignore." I slipped the swapped documents inside a hollow behind an old biography, hiding the evidence until I could move it safely. Then I stepped into the corridor light, feeling smaller but no less dangerous. My footsteps echoed as I neared the mirror at the end of the hall. In the reflection, a figure stood behind me. I didn't turn. I waited until the house fell silent, until every light above the vault dimmed except for the emergency strip. Midnight. The corridors swallowed my footsteps. I told Celine we'd sought old records in the archive. Her voice trembled when she agreed. In that archive room, she handed me an envelope she'd kept hidden. Her hands shook. Inside, a handwritten confession. Marcella had forged signatures years ago, transferred assets behind the scenes. She added, "I should have told you sooner." At the bottom, her trembling name. Alongside the confession, a USB stick with full access. I stared at it, heart pounding. This was the final piece. With her eyes on me, Celine pressed forward. "I'm done hiding," she whispered. "I promised I'd protect her." The vault door flashed green when I used her key. Systems flickered as I advanced. Guards rattled at the perimeter, sensors tripped. I bypassed codes one by one. In the server bay, I planted drives. I uploaded the confession, the earlier trust swap documents, the financial logs. Alarms buzzed, but I held the override. Finger steady, screen alive. The assets began moving. Under moonlight on the cliffside balcony, the transfer reached 100 miles hours. Numerals blinked in confirmation. Offshore accounts activated. I listened to the hum of electricity and waves. Memory flickered, hours spent editing, nights spent silent. The broken kettle, the erased portraits. I whispered to the ocean, "Tonight I take back what was never mine to lose." Once transfers were complete, I erased logs, hid drives in hollow walls behind books. I crept through hallways, passing Marcella's door without pausing. The portraits watched me silently. I stepped onto the balcony one last time, watching mansion lights blur into darkness and see beyond. Then I slipped into the car and drove away like a ghost. I didn't look back. I stepped into the ballroom like I'd rehearsed it in my head 1,000 times, but never out loud. The music was soft, the lighting low, camera flashes popping here and there like warning shots. My name wasn't on the program, not on the banners, not even whispered in the introductions. Honorary guest, they called me in the seating chart. I didn't need a title. I needed one seat. I walked past them all. The polished smiles, the half-laughs cut short when they noticed me. Marcella stood near the bar, pretending not to see. Elysia had already taken the stage, eyes darting between donors and dignitaries. The same people who once called me a model of discretion now whispered behind napkins and nodded politely. Unsure how to react, I held the clutch close under my arm. Inside it, that envelope pulsed like a second heartbeat. I wasn't nervous. I was clear. Tonight, I told myself, I don't come as a guest. I come as the author of truth. When the dinner plates were cleared and the air buzzed with small talk, I stood up. No podium, no microphone. I pulled the envelope from my clutch and laid it open in front of me. Slowly, deliberately, I reached inside and pulled out my wedding ring. That tiny band of gold that had once meant hope. Then silence, then ownership. I placed it at the center of the table. Not tossed, not dropped. Just set it down, like you'd place a receipt on a counter you no longer owe. I return this, I said, my voice just loud enough to carry. Not out of hate, but because it no longer defines me. Gasps, sharp and real, rolled across the room like a tide. Marcella blinked hard, jaw tightening. Elysia froze, her hand half raised. The ring caught the light just right, flashing back 100 moments I'd swallowed to keep peace. I didn't sit back down. I turned, heels clicking against marble, and headed for the projection hall. They followed in silence, not everyone, but enough. I stopped near the console, handed off the drive. The lights dimmed, then came the opening scene. Email chains dated, time-stamped, trust swaps, video footage of forged meetings, and then Celine's voice, shaky but steady, reading aloud from Marcella's own notes. No music, no filters, just the raw footage, the truth played out like a confession with receipts. Marcella stood halfway through, didn't speak, didn't storm, just stood there, trembling, caught between disbelief and fury. I stepped closer to the screen, voice calm. This isn't revenge, this is reclamation. A legal voiceover followed, outlining the executed transfer of control, of assets, of every document buried under years of manipulation. I didn't need applause. The silence said enough. Back in the ballroom, the chaos unfolded, raised voices, security whispering into sleeves, Marcella trying to intercept whispers with desperate logic. I didn't stop to watch it unravel. I slipped through the hallway, the same one I used to walk at night when no one remembered I lived here, past the portraits that used to skip me, now somehow balanced. On the balcony, the sea stretched out like a page too full to rewrite. The waves below were relentless, like time itself, not waiting for permission. I closed my eyes, letting the wind hit me clean in the face. I didn't win because they lost, I whispered. I won because I remembered who I was. Then I turned, walked back through the gravel path, past the guests still stuck between disbelief and denial. My car was parked just beyond the hedges. I slid in, started it, and let the road lead me away. A buzz on my phone lit up the console. Marisol. When you're ready, her message read, I'll stand with you. The night was still, but something in the world had changed.